Hello and welcome to Stories from the Wire, the AppNeta podcast, where we talk to the experts about the most pressing app and network issues facing the enterprise today and tell you how to work smarter, not harder, to speed up resolution. I'm Paul Davenport, AppNeta's resident tech journalist, and each week we're going to dive into a specific issue that we've helped an IT team tackle. Recently, we hosted a webinar with our Chief Customer Officer, Adam Edwards, and our Director of Global Alliances, John Tewfik, that discussed the concept of hybrid work. Specifically, how both the definition and perception of hybrid work has evolved over the past couple of years, and what strategies need to be transformed in kind to navigate a hybrid work world. For today's episode, we're sharing part one of that conversation, where you'll hear Adam kick us off with his take on how IT and ops teams used to manage hybrid workers, before John joins in to discuss some of the winning networking technologies that came in handy throughout the pandemic, specifically VDI, before unpacking some of the findings of AppNeta's recent 2021 Future of Internet Outlook. While this is just the beginning of our larger conversation around hybrid work, more to come in next week's podcast, there's a lot of valuable food for thought and considerations for any IT professional managing a decentralized worker footprint. So enjoy this excerpt and be sure to tune in next week for part two of our conversation. Okay, guys. Well, to set the scene, let's dive right in. Let's talk about hybrid work. Were people using this term a few years ago, and did it have the same meaning pre-pandemic that it has today?
Interesting to hear the word hybrid, Paul. We didn't really hear it that often in the before time. It's most often used to describe the future of work. But I don't think the definition of it has changed that much from then to now. We've always had productivity workers. These are your users at distributed offices that are typically well managed. They're accessing applications that are traditionally delivered from your on-prem data center. And in recent years, those have migrated and found their way up to third-party SaaS or the cloud, whether that's Azure or AWS. And then to connect them all together, the apps to the users, these are typically or have been well-managed corporate networks. Think MPLS backhaul, or to some extent VPN, where you've had the small cohorts of transient users who might be working from home one day a week, or they're traveling, they need to get something done for quarter end and on their vacation, or they're in a Starbucks. So we've had this definition of hybrid work for some time.
Yeah, and I would say from a user perspective, when you think about it, the user's experience of this, generally, networks that deliver the applications and where applications live has been mostly invisible to the user, especially in the context of working from office. You know, IT has already done cloud migrations. They have history of using both, kind of traditional data center delivered applications as well as cloud delivered applications. And from a user perspective, that's mostly invisible. The difference being that when a user was remote, they absolutely knew there was something different about getting access to their application. They would have to go do something, have to turn on their VPN, they'd have to make some kind of change, and there would be some kind of expectation change around how that application was being delivered, and to some extent, the experience of that application as well. And so I think that's the thing that's also blurring from a user expectation standpoint, is that now that needs to be much more seamless, whether they're in the office or working remotely. There isn't this conscious kind of change of how an application is going to be delivered.
And to bring that invisibility, IT always did a really good job. So think of IT as in the middle, knitting everyone together, being central to ensuring users can access the core services from wherever they were. And if that ever wasn't the case, IT had SLAs, they had the service providers and the application providers and owners on speed dial, and they could get things fixed really quickly when issues arose with user experience. I think what's really changed, other than the very definition of hybrid hasn't, but I think the components and the key actors here have. So all these actors have moved outside the well-managed four walls of the corporate network and infrastructure that you've had your hands on. And a lot of that's happened all at once in the last year and a half. So
we've all been thinking about cloud-based delivery of applications and, thinking about what hybrid was. One of the applications that actually came to mind for me was VDI. I couldn't help but think about VDI as being one of those technologies that actually almost had it right for delivering applications to anywhere at any time. But I really feel like when VDI was deployed years ago, there was still something not really kind of aligned with the any application anywhere. There was still something different around how you access VDI environments. Like maybe you still turned on a VPN to get there, and it didn't quite feel as seamless as it could have or should have, because it was right there. It had all the right kind of look and feel of a next generation type of delivery of an application. But what's been really interesting over the last year, I feel like, we've said this is the year of VDI. I don't know how many times, There's been a really strong comeback of VDI over the last year, and it truly has been delivered in a more anywhere at any time type of context, I think more than ever before. And so I don't know if this is the year or next year is going to be the year of a breakout VDI. And I don't know how many times we've said that or thought that over the last several years, but that one truly feels like one of those hybrid things that almost had it right and for sure is kind of coming into its own over the last year.
So mental note, breaking news, this will be the year of VDI.
Right. This is the year.
So if we think about how we'd connect to an application like VDI, the service delivery network and chain has grown a lot more complex. Just think about the last mile for a moment. I heard a story the other day about a user trying to connect to an app hosted in Azure, and they were connecting over their last mile, which was a residential broadband circuit powered by Xfinity, and their in-home network was a single access point hotspot. So no Wi-Fi mesh, nothing well managed, and the user expectations being as high as ever today. I want this right now. And the actual outcome of IT having to troubleshoot that situation, really challenging. In fact, that's just one use case, but we wanted to learn how the greater knowledge base, knowledge workers are affected. So we put out a survey of over 1,000 productivity workers in North America recently, and we asked them about what their work from home challenges were. These are users who depended on their last mile internet provider to do work. And I think many of you probably would be very familiar with all of these issues, if not many of them. Slow loading times for websites. Who here has ever had a call or their own experience when the app is slow, right? It happens probably more times than you care to admit. Video calls freezing. I was on a webinar. I had numbers 2 and 3 converge for me about 6 months ago. I was hosting a webinar and my last mile ISP flickered and I lost a session mid-sentence. That was kind of awkward, but that happens. So there you have video calls freezing, sometimes as a result of brownouts or an outright outage of service, issues with the ISP, streaming content, and a lot of other ancillary challenges. I think one of the takeaways here is that user productivity suffers when any one of these happen. And if we'd taken this survey, say 2, even 3 years ago, for corporate offices who depend on their last mile internet provider from a remote site to do their work, you would have seen a lot less incidents of these and other related issues. So while hybrid work is similar in theory between today and a couple of years ago, the scale of each actor, whether it's user, application, connectivity, has changed over time from being within the 4 walls of the well-managed enterprise to being without.
All right. Thank you to Adam and John, and thank you listeners for joining us on Stories from the Wire, the AppNeta podcast. Subscribe to our feed to get the latest tips and tricks every week on how to manage network performance for the future of work. And stay tuned next week for the next installment of our conversation with the team here at AppNeta.